We're now going to have our next conversation with Jenny Lester Moffitt, a senior fellow with American Farmland Trust and the former Undersecretary for Marketing and Regulatory Programs at the U.S. Department of Agriculture. So nice to see you. Yeah. Round of applause. I want to dive right in, Jenny, if that's okay. Yeah. What does keeping farmers on the land mean to you personally?
Oh, well, I mean, I think we've talked a lot about all of these different things, right? We just got off a great conversation on soil health and the work that farmers are doing, advancing conservation practices. To me personally, I think back to when my dad converted to organic farming back in the 1980s. And when he converted to organic farming, he didn't know other people who were farming in the way that he wanted to farm.
Right.
And so he went to field days. He traveled throughout the state and he met other farmers who were farming that way and networked. And I think the power of farmers coming together, networking, sharing practices, mentoring each other.
Right.
He first as a mentee and then was able to turn around and then be a mentor. All of those different things together where farmers are creating a coalition, whether they call it that or not, and networking together and advancing their shared learning. And I think that is really important when we talk about keeping farmers on the land. It's really about farmers empowering each other to stay on the land, to explore together, to advance and to innovate together, whether that is conservation practices, whether that is markets, whether that is adapting to all of the different changing dynamics that farmers and ranchers are facing each and every day, from finding qualified skill workforce to everything in between. Farmers need to have the resources to be able to be successful in agriculture.
Right.
They need to be able to, and I heard this when I was at USDA and as I traveled the country, we all saw right at the beginning of the pandemic that farmers lost markets.
Right.
Farmers lost critical markets that they were selling to, whether it was to restaurants because many restaurants had to shutter or other supply chains. They lost those markets. And what did farmers do? They stepped up. Farmers stepped up and pivoted. Small farmers were able to redirect and sell into local and regional markets. Larger farmers donated excess product to food banks and to schools. Farmers stood up because that's what agriculture does. And that is all about how what we do in agriculture. And I was at the state at the time, and we developed programs to support farmers to be able to connect to food banks and to schools. But when we were at USDA, we had the opportunity with some funding to really then actually turn that innovation that farmers and ranchers did and actually create a program to pay farmers to be able to sell to food banks at a fair pay and create the enabling environment to make that happen. So for keeping farmers on the land, it is everything. It's a whole system. Yep. It's everything from working together and networking and learning and innovating on trialing farming practices all the way to creating the market capacity and the culture and the infrastructure to be able to access new markets, because if you can't sell your product, you're definitely not going to be able to grow it for the next season.
Right, and you're continuing that work that happened at USDA, at AFT with the Thriving Farms and Ranches initiative to bring those regional food systems really together and make them thrive.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're really excited. Now I'm at American Farmland Trust and really taking a lot of the things that we have seen farmers and ranchers do and the work that we've done at AFT for over 45 years and really bring them together right now to meet the moment that farmers and ranchers are facing, which is direct technical assistance, which is market development and growing local agricultural economies. It is also making sure that as we do all those things that we're working on land conservation and looking at the bigger picture of the landscape of farmland protection, and then, and importantly, layering on policy, because we have to create the enabling environment to make all of those other things happen for farmers and ranchers to thrive.
And you talked about meeting the moment, and we've talked so much about the community and knowledge sharing that's needed for farmers to thrive. That's especially important right now. And I'm wondering if you can just speak to that a little bit. Things are tough for farmers, but they can come together and learn from one another.
Yeah, things are incredibly tough for farmers and ranchers. I mean, we've known that for some time. What we saw at the beginning of the pandemic, what we're seeing this year is really a product of generations of challenging times for agriculture, and really now the time is to really reinvest in those communities in agriculture. When I was at USDA, I had the incredible opportunity to travel the country and meet with farmers and ranchers. And I remember doing a roundtable with some farmers in Montana and hearing about how back in the 1970s and 80s, they were working together to advance all these different advance organic agriculture, and now continue that organic agriculture and make sure that it's continues in the regenerative nature as well. It isn't just about the practices; it's about also knowing where the inputs are. We've heard a lot of people talk about cover crops. Okay, where do we find cover crop seed? What is the right cover crop that we use? All of those things are very important. And then once we've got the product, how do we sell it? How do we come together and sell it? And so at USDA, we created a program where we were driving demand through local procurement. We invested in the power of food banks and schools to be able to pay a fair price for the food that was being purchased, that they were purchasing from local farmers and ranchers. And importantly, we didn't stop there. We also said, if you can't get your product from your farm to the food bank, none of that will work. So the infrastructure and the capacity, I often say, I used to run my family's farm with my dad, and I handled all of our sales and marketing. And it was easier for me to ship walnuts to Japan than it was to ship to the neighborhood school. And now maybe that's walnuts and that's different, but the infrastructure for exporting, the infrastructure for that market was just there in place, but regional food hubs were just not there at the time. Now we've really invested in regional food hubs. We're investing more in local processing capacity, all of those different components that make it important for a farmer to be able to get their product from farm to wherever they market they want to get to.
It's a really holistic approach. And I love that AFT is doing that. We have about 2 minutes left. For sustainable, regenerative, organic, whatever you want to call it, new conventional to work, it has to work economically for farmers. Can you speak to that point?
Yeah, absolutely. So I did a roundtable in Minnesota a couple years ago, and I talked to some farmers there who were, all of the above, sustainable, regenerative, organic, a variety of different types of farmers that were there. And they talked about how for them, it's about really talking about what they do, but also and making sure that that customers understand what they're doing. But more importantly, it's about being able to incrementally grow their market. And so they talked about how they first started to sell to their local farmers market, then maybe some restaurants, and then maybe some schools, and then grow. And that latter approach was really important for them to be able to implement those practices. I've heard that in so many different cases around the country. In Alabama, farmers really looking at, and I think this is really important too, is diversifying what they're growing. Right. So when you have a crop that is in excess supply year after year, you really start to think about, okay, what do I grow differently? And so for Alabama, they're really looking at how do we really start to feed our own community, and how do we diversify the crops to be able to make that happen. And so I think, throughout the country, we've seen these areas where people are really starting to recognize that nutrition security is really important, that farmers are feeding our own communities. A lot of the things that Alice Waters talked about are so critical. And when you do that, what you have on the back end is you have farmers who have the opportunity to then really reinvest back into conservation practices, to soil health, to water, to renewable energy that we'll get to later on in this morning. All of those different things are possible when farmers and ranchers are able to see that income stream and diversified income streams, right? And those are things that AFT is really working on as well. We'll talk later about renewable energy. bioeconomy, and I'm sure Bianca talked about things like biochar and how
Sure,
that's an
sure.
important part of the circular economy. Because here's what we know. We know that when a farmer is able to see things progress on their farm, when they're able to have markets, when they're able to really be able to see the long-term vision for their farm, they're able to invest
Right,
long-term in their
absolutely.
soil health. They're investing
Absolutely.
long-term in land conservation, and they're investing long-term in their communities. And that's a big part also of what we talk about with Thriving Farms and Ranches is not just the regeneration in your own farming
Yeah.
operation and on your soil, but also the circular economies that are happening and the money that's flowing and staying within rural communities as well.
Yeah, not just helping farmers survive, but helping them thrive.
Yeah.
I love it. Please give a round of applause to Jenny. Thank you so much.
Thank you.